Hello, everybody. Welcome to part 42 of Seeking Harmony. Today we're going to be discussing some current events and, how unionism views them, basically, and what the truth is in all of these things. We're going to start off with talking about the war in Ukraine going on and how things are changing with it being winter time now, and then we'll go from there into talking about Taiwan and China. There were local elections in Taiwan recently, where there was like a change of political leadership. So we'll speak about that, and then also a bit of news about a Syrian brother and sister who became Olympians and are featured in a movie after escaping from Syria's war, and clean hydrogen fuel, which is becoming more common in Australia. So that is our roadmap for the day. Now, what do you guys feel about the situation in Ukraine, and how could you summarize it?
Well, I think there's actually a lot to think about, or maybe to feel, but to be precise, basically winter has kind of fallen really hard in Europe, especially Eastern Europe, and Ukraine has or parts of Ukraine have no basically nuclear resources or energy resources anymore. And basically, a lot of people are being stranded in eastern cities because they don't have a lot to survive, and they've even been called to evacuate the cities. And basically, there's talk that Russia is using this as much as it has been using bombarding schools or like refuge for people to kind of like I guess I would say pull at the at people's, I think, resilience and mental health and strength to resist the situation, and to kind of have some advances in the war. So yeah, that would be the summary of it all. And now to discuss and feel about it.
Yeah, I feel like Russia is basically testing Ukraine's strength, basically their resilience and their will to have freedom. And yeah, I feel like it's kind of straightforward in that it's kind of like, how ego like pushes on you, and anything having to do with fear, it tries to find your weak points and things where you don't feel very stable, and it tries to like push you over there, and you just have to like, just choose love and love yourself and just not believe it and say no to it. And I feel like that's what this is, and I also feel like it's interesting too to feel into and think about the people who are staying in some of those cities that are like without power, because there are some people who are like just still staying there and like living in these really like crazy conditions. And yeah, I was feeling that they might not want to accept, or they might not want to like let go, I guess, of their home or something. But I feel like it's like a big sacrifice to make just to like stay in that city, yeah, what do you guys feel about that?
Yeah, I also feel, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that that, like Sage and I were talking about this last night, it's that they feel like if they leave, they're leaving their home, but they have to come to know and a place that their home is within them, and home is something within you. But also, I do feel that it would actually be better for Ukraine and for their side of the war if the people left, if they didn't stay in Ukraine, because it's it's actually costing Ukraine resources and safety to go in and um, to provide for the people that are still there. And I feel like it would actually be more resilient to leave, and then the people of Ukraine would, instead of being, possibly not making it through the winter, they would be able to come back and be, healthy Ukrainians in their, well, in Ukraine, once they have, as the war is going now, they are winning right now, so they could come back and be, give to Ukraine and to their culture, instead of like trying to um you know kind of tough it out and hold on to what's there right now. That's kind of just what I felt from reading the article too.
Mhm. Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's a little bit of that in there. And when you guys were talking, I was thinking about situations. I don't know if you've ever heard about these stories, but wherever there is a volcano and there is a big crisis, basically you have to evacuate because it's really dangerous. You would hear stories of people who want to stay in their home no matter what, no matter the danger. I think, yeah, and I think it's the same for fires, I guess. Maybe you guys are more familiar with these stories. And the feeling I have from that is that obviously home is a very sensitive and emotional place for everybody. And so there's definitely, yeah, this feeling that Isaiah was mentioning about, like, the feeling that you will lose, the feeling that of losing everything that you have and losing your home. But I feel like the healing that would need to take place there for these people that don't want to evacuate when there is a dire situation like that is that they're losing more probably energy and life force and really everything, because it's like there's nothing left staying there than being healthy, going back to their family where it's safe, and probably going back afterwards when the deed is done, and they haven't lost their lives instead of like losing their home. And I think, yeah, we live in a world where we're attached to material things because we have emotional value for us. And also it's the part of the world where there have been so many wars in the past, like 150 years, that probably people are in their DNA, in their culture, they're kind of sick and tired to lose everything. But yeah, it's just like you have to realize that you're not losing. You're actually protecting your life, putting a boundary on it, and going where God calls you. I think that's an integral part that we learn with this work, is that, I guess, for one, nothing that is built on God will be lost. This is something that Jeff told me one day when I had a situation in my city, and I felt that maybe we would have to go somewhere else and evacuate. But also that you need to be able to accept the change, and that love is where God calls you, and you go where love wants to go. Like you're not the maneuver here. Love is. And sometimes it involves moving. Sometimes it involves staying where you are. But no matter what, you go where love calls you. And yeah, I wish I have a lot of compassion, because I know the feeling that it evokes in people to feel that they are losing their home. But yeah, I guess that the healing that we need to be there is that there is no loss, actually, you know.
Yeah, I understand that from knowing everything I know about Europe. Were you talking about the fire of the Notre Dame Cathedral? Because I know
Oh,
that was something that was like dear to the hearts of people in France
mm,
and stuff. And
no, because I wasn't in Paris when it happened. It was more like something exploded on the highway besides my house, and I thought that everything would go into flames, kind of thing. And it was really scary, but
yeah,
it also was a time where there was a lot of healing that happened for me there. But yeah.
yeah, yeah, I would imagine. I understand. I feel like I would go through the same thing if we had some issue like that here where we had to like leave where we are, you know. But yeah, I feel that ultimately it's best for the war effort to like for fighting Russia to for people who like can't or aren't called to or whatever contribute to the war effort to just, you know, leave those cities because yeah, nothing is really lost there. So yeah, I feel like that's probably what it is and at the core of it. And yeah, I think another lesson too is to let go of ancestral trauma and that you don't have to repeat it. Because I remember, so in this video we saw, this guy was saying, he was like, yeah, we're using these old stoves for heat, wood burning stoves. And he was like, we haven't used these since like 60 years ago during the Soviet times. And so that tells you, I think that tells you something, that there might be that feeling or belief of like, I don't know, like our ancestors, or maybe even when we were little, like we had this situation of like whatever it was, like not war, but maybe like poverty or something, and we had like these wood burning stoves and we used them, now we're doing it again. And it's like you don't have to do that, you know, just because you experienced that before. You can make a new choice now, you can get out of there. And which in the Soviet times, freedom of movement wasn't as big of a thing for people. Nowadays, certainly, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe that consciously they're living into something that was there 60 years ago. Maybe also the thing saying that our ancestors did it that way, so we can do it as well. I think the big missing spiritual component for most of the planet right now is actually understanding that God is internal, but is also like ever changing, and that making new choices is actually the safest bet. And really like interrogating yourself on how are you loving and helping your country right now? Are you loving them by participating? Are you loving them by staying? Are you loving them by living? And it's gonna be like different for everyone. And of course, like we're not there so on the terrain, so we don't actually know how it's like, but there's definitely a component of like knowing how to make new choices and choices that are actually loving for your people.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah. And I think to branch out a little bit, but still related, there is a little story about actually Putin, the Russian president, inviting mothers of soldiers to visit him. And there was actually a mother activist that spoke out and said that she didn't get invited. A lot of people didn't get invited. It was by choice, and it was pretty much like a communication just from the parliament. Obviously, like she's a mother of a soldier, so she's not like impartial on all things. But I think it goes back to what we were discussing like almost six months ago, that basically touching the families and separating them is something that is very dear to Russian people. Basically, I think as these Ukrainians are still attaching to their home, like Russian people are saying like, don't touch my families. And I think a lot of resistance is going to come from like, if you destroy the family union of Russian people, like it's not gonna end well. And I think that's kind of the energy that I got from that video of that mother. But I'm sure there are a lot of things to unpack from it. Or so yeah, I'm curious to know like quickly how you guys feel about it.
Yeah, I felt like she was, I mean, she's obviously totally correct in pointing that out, that Putin was favoring people who supported the war, like who were completely behind the war, and he's talking to them, and he's not talking to mothers or who have like, yeah, sons fighting who are like so about the war, or who like don't really support it or who question it. Yeah, and that's total, of course, that shows a lack of compassion, and also really just that he's using the people instead of actually loving them. But it kind of misses the point, what she's saying. That's my feeling about it, is because like if you're someone, if you don't support the war and Putin is the one fighting the war, like not fighting war, what's the word? He's the one calling for the war. Why do you want his support? Like, why do you want him to say, I know what you're going through. I know what you're going through, dear. And I support you, and I support your son in fighting this thing. And, you know, we'll get through it. Like, you wouldn't want it if you oppose the war, right? That was my feeling. So I felt like it was kind of, yeah, like she's correct, but she's not challenging the war like head on, of course, obviously. She's maybe trying to stir up some sentiment of like being able to criticize Putin, but in a way that's like not gonna really arouse like the fury of the state. But you know what I mean? That's how I felt about it. It was kind of like, yeah.
You know what you're touching on is perfectly illustrating, I think, the choice of Russia and why Putin hasn't been stopped, because obviously it needs to be like a choice in consciousness, unconscious or not, for him to be at the head of a state and doing what he does. And I think the thing is that people will be all about getting their ends out of politics and letting the government and maybe KGB doing everything that they want to, unless it touches the family. So what she was speaking on about, the way that the news media was portraying it, made it seem like she was against the war. But was she really against the war? Or was she against, breaking the family construct and society of Russian people? Is that the true question? Because obviously the news was using it to make a point that this war is nonsense. But maybe that was not at all the sentiment of the lady, because she didn't really speak about that. So yeah, I think with no surprise, I think it's perfectly illustrating why this war has been ongoing, because there's still a choice to make for Russian people, a choice to like revoke the status quo, and not just when their families are involved, but when there is good or bad literally involved in their leader and their government.
Yeah.
I, I keep pressing two buttons, Max. I think what you said, you just nailed it. Like, they still have to make that choice, and yeah, I think that she was actually upset about, not about the war, but about the breaking of the family, and yeah, it shows exactly that choice isn't being made there, and yeah, it shows what the Russian people are choosing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it was more just like not feeling included or not feeling loved or supported in like what she was going through.
Exactly. Yep.
And her son's life being on the line. Yeah. Yeah, basically. So yeah, it makes me think of like, if any other world, obviously, if any other world leader did that, it wouldn't go down well either. But yeah, so, but still, yeah, I'm just like, okay. That's my
Yeah,
my opinion.
I think okay is a good sentiment on Russia right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, I think that's it. Like, these are the choice of some Ukrainians, these are the choice of Russian people, and yeah, let's just see. It's been 6 months. It feels like it's been longer, but let's just see how it evolves and if it's going to follow the same pattern as many countries where they're actually forced to make a choice. Like, would families and family constructs be touched so deep that they're forced to make a choice, or would they be forced to make a choice otherwise? We don't know. But I think we're getting a solid picture or how they feel, or maybe their lack of sentiment about the thing. Yeah, which is a choice in some way.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. So, should we talk about Taiwan's local elections?
Yeah, that's like an interesting one. I didn't like, yeah, I wasn't seeing that coming, but so yeah. Summarize, do you want to summarize it, Joran?
Oof. You know, our Taiwan situation is like difficult to summarize, but I'll try. Basically, so the recent history of Taiwan is not that they actually don't have a side. Like, polls say that a lot of people are for the status quo, and their president, that was there since 2016, I think. Even though she's more pro-independence than pro-China, when she publicly spoke, she was reflecting the choice of their people. That is like, well, we don't make a choice, and she was avoided like a lot of words that make me say that there's a lot of compatibility with political ambiguity that the United States has about Taiwan, for example. So yeah, a lot of people were pro status quo, and when I say a lot, it's like 70 to 90% support according to polls. And right now, local elections are ongoing or were ongoing, and yeah, basically the government was looking forward to either reinforcing their political presence with it, or be revealed that what the people want, basically, and make a choice out of it. And it just so happened that they did really, really poorly in these elections. And the party that was supporting a lot of things, but amongst those things, a government that was pro-China won a lot of seats locally. And the president she just quit because she said, like, really, she was speaking of a lot of changes and a lot of reforms for Taiwan, and basically she was saying that probably the people were not agreeing with the changes that she wanted. And she didn't talk about independence, it was other things. But just like the results of the vote made her say that clearly the people have made their choice and there needs to be a new government. So that's it. I think, again, there's a lot to unpack because I have a lot of questions. If local elections are anything like basically anywhere in the world, how was the participation? We don't have a lot of information, that's the thing. What was the participation rate? Were people voting against what she wanted to change, or was it more about basically their exterior politic and making a choice about China and then defense against China because China has been like encircling them with military for more than 6 months? And was it really about that? What does her choice to quit say? Was it the right decision? Is it a cultural decision? And what will be the consequences? So I think there are a lot to think about, but yeah. What do you guys like? Just your feeling on the election. What is it?
Yeah, I feel like the people of Taiwan who were voting in those local elections, they pretty much responded to questions in the exit polls, like after the elections. The China's threats to them were the biggest factor in how they voted, and so they voted for the Kuomintang, which is the party that there's actually the founding party in Taiwan of like the original, leader of the democratic movement in China, like for China to be like a republic back in like the 20s and 30s. And so, but nowadays the Kuomintang is more of like a pro, I don't know how you would say it, in the article I read it said pro-business, which is kind of vague, but like more about being close to China with their business ties and less about like, they wouldn't want to like do things that would provoke China as much. So I'm seeing it as more like, there's probably a feeling of like, I would say like the fear of like provoking China, that they just really don't want to get in a conflict with them. They don't want the party as much to be in charge that wants to move toward independence. They want to try to like pacify China. They don't want all this military threat going on. And maybe they feel like ultimately, because the polls say like they want Taiwan to be governed independently, and a good amount even say they want to declare independence, but they're not to that point where they want to declare independence as a majority. So I think maybe people are feeling like, let's maintain the status quo, but like, let's also try to like pacify China. I think it's like, because they're feeling that if there were a military conflict, Taiwan wouldn't be able to stand up to China or maybe something like that. And yeah, it just seems very like, they're kind of in like an in-between situation, like kind of back and forth
Yeah.
situation, liminal.
It seems like there are a lot of in-betweens energies discussed tonight, but what would you guys say that it also almost feels like they're still choosing the status quo, and it's that fear of the changing of the status quo, because basically the status quo says we want peace, we want China out of our affairs, and if pacifying them and going in their sense in the business way or something makes them more pacified, and I get to keep my individual life of freedom, like we're going to choose that. So yeah, it's a bit like, it's a bit of a confusing choice. No, I guess it's not confusing, it's just that it's a choice out of fear, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like they are choosing fear here, and I disagree with that choice. And it just, because if so, everything that has been said is, that Taiwan does want to keep their independence, or wants to gain more independence. And I guess I can understand like the wanting to pacify China, but that's not going to work. Like, there's no way that's going to work. The only way to actually get to choose what they want is to stand up for it and actually choose their independence. Don't, because by choosing fear, like you're choosing like China to like, they're eventually going to just take or like run Taiwan over because they're not standing up against it. I just feel like there's that choice still has to be made if they truly want their independence, that like you can't be afraid. If you really want your freedom, you have to choose it, because that's the only way that anyone gets their freedom, is through the choice. And you have to go through like the courage it takes to have that, instead of, because if they choose fear, like it's just giving China that even more permission to like kind of run them over, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We're gonna draw comparisons with Russia again, like we've done in previous conversations, but a lot of people thought that Russia annexing Crimea was gonna pacify them, and that we were gonna have a status quo for at least 10 years, which didn't happen because we had a war in less than 10 years, So it's never gonna be the answer. And I think a lot of people in the world are actually learning that it's okay to stand up, and in fact, stand up, don't just fear. Truly stand up for your people, because you're gonna get run over by the abuser. And I think no one would have guessed that Ukraine would still be standing there. Like, the situation is dire in like a line in eastern Ukraine. But other than that, it's not at all. It's actually pretty like good for Ukraine. Not good, but yeah, positive. And have you guys seen the size of Russia? So yeah, obviously culturally it's gonna be way different for China and Taiwan, because it's not the same engagement, it's not the same culture and everything like that. If there's ever a conflict, but yeah, never give in to the abuser is the big lesson that if there's a big lesson that we would have had this year in 2022, is that it never works, and you should actually stand up. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I feel there's probably just some element of like giving power to the fact that China has such a large military, and B, China is so much more tied to Taiwan than Russia is tied to Ukraine. Like, so I get Russia's smaller and Russia's more isolated economically from Ukraine, the rest of the world and Ukraine, but it's still, they still want what they want. And the truth is still the truth that, you know, I don't know, they desire democracy and independence, and that's God's way, or that's the way, you know, it's freedom. It's not giving into China and trying to like make bargains with them, because the fact that their government is that way, is choosing all this control and abuse and fear, just like in like their COVID lockdown issues too right now, you know. So yeah.
Yeah. And we can go to China in a little bit, but feels like, I mean, have you seen Taiwan, and have you seen its economic growth and the way people live, and it's almost like they're not aware of the amount of power they have right now. Because in any way, even if it was not for pacifying China, why would you have a need for business ties? It's seeing Taiwan, it really doesn't make sense. Maybe on the surface, but again, you talked about the ties. So, and I think these ties are, and maybe enmeshment, are pretty much still there, and we need to take that into consideration while speaking about that.
I feel that it's probably, I mean, I think that that's an element of it, that they feel it probably feels similar to how some Ukrainians feel too, who they feel attached to their home. And I think for a lot of Taiwanese, Taiwan feels like home, but I think maybe for some, like China still feels like home, like the bigger mainland China, because a lot of the population of Taiwan come from China, you know, the mainland. And it's not like Ukraine, where there's like a Ukrainian identity, and then there's like Russia is like it has a distinct language. You know, in Taiwan, like Mandarin is the majority language and everything. So I get it, but at the same time, it's like a lesson in detaching and like, seeking healthier relationships, basically. Yeah. So, and there are healthier ones to be found.
It's ultimately whether I want to stay in China or not. Oh, sorry.
Oh, Z, I think Z was delayed.
Yeah, you're pretty delayed.
Didn't hear you.
Oops. Hope we don't lose him.
Oh, lame. I did. That's okay. Go ahead, Yoreen. You can say.
Okay.
Go ahead. You can say, and I'll just add my piece in after.
I would say I don't remember what I would say. Yeah, whether they stay in China or not, I think there is a lot of healing to be had in terms of enmeshment and codependency anyways. And so I feel like maybe it's their lesson right now. And maybe that's why things are the way it is. Like, you know, sometimes you don't realize that you're enmeshed in a relationship until a certain point. And sometimes you make like steps to go back to that relationship. Sometimes you make boundaries, and up to the Taiwanese people to kind of figure out like how it's gonna go and how they want to manage that. Isaiah, I think you're back to present time.
Is it back?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. Yeah, it feels like that they, like you said, yeah, they're not aware of their power, and then this is probably their lesson right now, because if they truly were choosing independence, the election wouldn't have gone the way that it has, you know. So they still need to learn these lessons to truly make that core choice of independence, I think,
Yeah.
which is what they want, but it's not. They have to heal through this fear first, and truly, like, but it just takes a choice, you know. It's just a core choice, so they just have to choose that independence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that choice, the choice of theirs is even more ironic in light of the fact that like the Chinese government's power right now is like kind of being in question. And like there are these like big protests going on about the COVID thing, like the zero COVID policy, and the Chinese government is choosing an element of like control and trying to like keep the virus in, and people are saying no because it's too expensive for us. It's expensive for us, and we don't want it.
Yeah, it's come up to unprecedented demonstrations, but actually people were hurt in the fire because they couldn't go out. If because of a COVID policy, you're prevented to go out of your apartment on fire, what does that say about your government? I think people maybe kind of are realizing to an extent that the government wasn't actually about having their best interest at heart, because that's what they promised. That's what they were promised in giving their time and energy and work and resources and investment and finances to the government, that they would be kept safe, that they would grow, that they would develop. And I think that lie is breaking right now. And that's ironic that Taiwan would feel that they're unworthy or like not powerful, but I guess it's like Ukraine. It's kind of that you kind of have to realize that no one can make that choice to be strong but you. Like you can have the support of outsiders and other countries, but you would need to make that choice for yourself. Otherwise, you're gonna like go back to fear, even though you're one of the most like powerful and influential region of the world at the moment.
Yeah. Yes, totally. Like with Taiwan, that's definitely the case. And like with China, I was interested by like, I was like, why China is concerned about the virus spreading? Like, don't they have like a higher like rate of vaccination? And like, so yeah, it's interesting. So I was asking that, and yeah, Isaiah and I were reading about that last night and learning about that. And it was interesting to see, like, so China has like a lower vaccination rate for the elderly. And so they're the most vulnerable to, if they get COVID, they're the most vulnerable to like dying from it, you know, or having major issues with it. And the Chinese government doesn't want to be seen as impotent or illegitimate, or I don't know what was the word, but like people would like be like, oh, seeing like these people are dying from COVID, like you guys say that you're like so great at containing COVID and you aren't. So China's being like, okay, so vaccination, we're not really getting people to buy into a vaccination, so as much as we need them to, so let's just do this really strict lockdown. It's gonna be okay, just force the people, make the people do it. It's gonna work. And it seems kind of like a case of arrogance and control, because we found that the Chinese government, so they were trying to not use vaccines made by like American companies or like foreign companies. And I was curious as to why, because I think that some of the vaccines created locally in China, like they don't have as good of an efficacy rate. And I think that I feel like there might be an element of like people there don't trust it as much, like the Chinese vaccines, but they don't have the choice. Like the government is saying, like, if you're a Chinese citizen, like you have to have a vaccine made in China because we don't want to give good PR to the West. We don't want to give them that win of being like, oh, they're supplying our vaccines. You know, that was my analysis of it. It was not, nobody was saying that, but that's what I was feeling of it. I don't know. What do you think, Yuri? Does that make sense? I know that was like a big.
No, it makes sense. That is extreme though, but that would explain because China is all about like pride and reputation and doing it all on the Chinese glory. So that could be an explanation. It's extreme. I don't want to say I'm surprised by the level of control and yeah, maybe probably arrogance displayed there. But it's still kind of surprising that you would go to this lens, because when you started talking, I was like, really, like, why is China like the only country that has such a strict zero COVID policy right now? What's the core of that? And basically, like a lot of things, a lot of crises that they are dealing with right now, it seems like they're just caught up in that web of bad choices and trying to get caught up to it by doing even more bad choices or not changing anything, which provokes worse things like people dying from a fire. Yeah, that's a lot. That's extreme. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, like that air, like like you're caught in like some sort of lie or some sort of self-image you're trying to maintain, and then things are like on fire, and you're like, no, it's fine, dude. Like my clothes are flame retardant. I have fire extinguishers. We're fine. Just
Just like the meme, we're fine.
oh,
We're
the
still
dog.
there.
Yeah, that dog needs to go.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Again, like having compassion for choices of people. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like they're kind of just trying to cover their asses because they screwed up. You know, they made the wrong choices in the beginning of COVID, and now they're still, you know, seeing the effects of it by, you know, not choosing the more effective vaccine from Moderna or Pfizer, and just keeping the vaccine. There are people using, you know, the Chinese made vaccines, and yeah, now it's really just like there's a real boiling point at this point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not like it's like shameful for them to use that, but I think that there's that strong stigma, or you know, there's just this feeling there that the government's been trying to push this narrative of like we don't need the West, like we're a competing world power, we compete with them. And it's just like, yes, but like, why do you need that? Like, why must you be in opposition when we're stronger together, you know? And yeah, why must we do that? And yeah.
And yeah, how a lot of countries having like conflicts and crises right now are saying that they don't need the West. And I actually think that the core of that is not to be anti-Western, but like feeling that there's a separation there. And I think we've already talked about that like a year ago in the chat and with Jeff, and a lot of people, let's be honest, like a lot of non-white culture have a lot to heal about feeling like they're separate. And that they're not of this world, that they don't have power in this world, and that they must be in opposition or doing their own thing. And it manifests in very different ways. depending on their choices and where they live and what's their culture. And but at the core, it's like this really like, I want to say, as a person of color, it feels like very, very hurtful. Just like seeing parts of our world not participating in our world. And not because they don't have a choice, just because that they feel like they would be hurt by the West or that they're better off without that. And it's just like, yeah, it's not about like anything else but the choice of separation at the core. And of course, like it makes side effects that need to be healed as well. But as soon as people are going to realize that we don't have a separation and that democracy and other political changes and choices are not to be against their culture, I think a lot would change for a lot of these countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as long as they stay strong, stand up for themselves, and don't give in to any like bad deals, then they'll be okay. Because China had like these wars fought by Europeans. I think it was like a European backed proxy war in China, like so within China, like the wars where there were like forces within China backed by Europe who were like, we want to sell opium like the as a drug, you know. And so China's own sovereignty was being like threatened and weakened and, you know, taken away like by the West, and Europeans were trying to make China their, you know, their little market and calm in a way, like. And so I understand there's like that trauma there, but it's something that can be healed. And I think it shows if you go the extreme route and you be very isolationist and very separate and have a competing mentality, that it can really, you know, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah, it's all about balance. And that's one of the things that I learned from Jeff and Shaleia is that I guess I'll never be white, I'll always be black, and there'll always be white. But we live in a world and we have unionism in a sense that we're going to discover about each other and knowing how to live accepting each other's cultures, because there is a lot of separation and gaps to heal there. And going one extreme, like totally obliterating your culture, and going the other way, totally being isolationist and separationist about the world, none of them are good choices because they're not choices out of love. Yeah, so don't give in to the forces, be balanced, choose love. It's pretty simple at the core, but it's a big challenge, especially when you have trauma, and it's something that a lot of people of color just need to heal and just need to take their time too, and maybe this geopolitical situation are going to help them actually making that choice. Yeah. And speaking of not giving in, standing up for yourself, maybe we could end on the feel-good story of the week, being the movie about Yusra Mardini, which is a Syrian refugee and her sister that learned to swim professionally in Syria when they were living in a pretty upper middle class like environment, pretty good environment, until the war happened, and how they had to be in exile and trained in Germany up until they were qualified for the Olympic Games in 2016. Beautiful story that was, it's good, I guess, that Netflix is supporting that story to that extent. And it feels good that entertainment is actually, but we can see that entertainment is actually capable of choosing good stories, inspirational stories to display to other people. So yeah, just feeling very happy and inspired by this movie, even though I haven't watched it yet, but I read a lot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's empowering. It's good to see an empowering, just pure good story. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Did you want to say more details about it, Isaiah? Did you want to? I felt called to ask you. You know, I won't.
I feel.
No, go ahead.
What'd you say?
No, I felt
Oh.
called to. I felt called to tell
Oh,
you.
I just think their story is amazing that they swam, you know, from their country to Greece for their freedom, and that like their extensive training and doing that is, you know, that led to their freedom and also them becoming Olympians. And I just think that it's incredible. I don't know, the whole thing's really just a really incredible story.
And maybe just the fact that they never lost faith. Like if you're seeing excerpts of the books and movies, like this really, I guess, pure energy we were talking about, Sage, and this happiness and smile and just energy about Yusra Mardini is just like, it's just like you see it and you feel, wow, like what an inspiration. And you just swam have the Mediterranean Sea, and now you don't even have a swimsuit to swim in, but you're going to a really famous German coach to train, and she never lost faith, never lost the joy inside her heart, really, really pure joy. And yeah, just feeling so inspired and revived just by the God and divinity that we can see in this person.
Yeah, it was cool to see that they were determined not to give into the situation, not to give into what the situation was showing them, and to be like empowered and to be like, we're not gonna like become more victims of this war, you know, we're not gonna, yeah, you know, do that. And you know, yeah, to be able to like share their gift with the world and overcome all of that, which was swimming. And it's cool that like their gift that they had been like cultivating was their kind of like their ticket out of Syria. That's an extreme feat to like swim across the sea to like escape from a war. But they did it, and for them it was like their next step. For them it was like feasible, like they were like, yeah, that sounds, I'm up for that. And that shocked me to read that, because I hear people swimming the English Channel or something, but like that, I think,
And they never succeed. It's so hard. Yeah, and it's such a small distance. Like you can see England from France,
oh
where
really?
they depart. Yeah,
But,
it's not that small, and it's not that big and not that deep. So to see that they got like from Syria to Greece, yeah, unimaginable. But yeah,
yeah,
they just like they made it.
yeah. So yeah, I don't know, it's a beautiful story.
And it's
Yes. Well,
yeah.
that, yeah, that about brings us to the end of our discussion. I did not, I didn't want to forget the story about more hydrogen-powered vehicles in Australia, but we are coming up to the end of our hour. Do you guys want to mention the story, or do you feel called to sign off?
I feel like we ended on a beautiful note, and maybe we can like dedicate more of the time to new resources and Australia later.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. Please feel free to like this video and subscribe on YouTube to follow us. Get more of our content and Church of Union's content about unionism and yeah, the path to union with love and God and your ultimate lover. And yes, and I was going to say something. And please feel free to comment with your feelings and thoughts about all of these things too, and engage on our YouTube channel or in Unionism Spiritual Discussion. So yeah, thank you everybody. And we'll be back next week for more. Bye.